One thing you're not going to achieve is weaning them off the one successful export industry that they actually have, right? That's highly technified and well integrated into every value chain you can think of. I would not start there, right? Now, to be more serious answer on your question, someone actually said that we have no there is no Afghan war. There's a one-year war that we keep renewing every year. So there really hasn't been much of a long-term development strategy for Afghanistan, because you can see, to answer your question, it's actually not all that hard. Many countries, it's hard in one way, but not hard in another way, right? Many countries have faced this, right? Indonesia in the 1980s was a heavily natural resource dependent economy. It was desperately poor. It was all based on exporting oil and wood from the outer islands and transferring a fraction of that to the inner islands where most of the people were. But essentially what it was an oil-based kind of economy. Today it's a G20 member, and it's entirely self-sustaining economically. Afghanistan, what happened is they completely fooled themselves on the kind of economy that it has. So if you look at the statistics from 2002 to 2010, they show 10% growth per year. Obama comes in and says we're leaving, and that 10% suddenly became negative 4%. Right? It was entirely based on the aid flows going into the country. Now, what did that do? Michaela, you're an economist on this. So what's the first thing that's going to happen if you take a country whose annual budget is $400 billion, and suddenly there's $14 billion in it, right? Right? You start to see the kind of distortions that you would exactly predict. So they can't export anything because they produce the same thing Turkey, Iran, and Pakistan do, except at 5 times the price. So there's nothing they can export. Right? They also, it becomes much cheaper to import everything. So even though they grow oranges in Jalalabad, they buy them all from China. Right? The same, and this is the entire economy is built this way. Right? If you go to the southernmost part of Afghanistan and you buy a chicken, it comes from Brazil. Right? These are not that hard to produce domestically, but there's absolutely no incentive to do that. The second thing is, when I got to Kabul in 2002, there were 400,000 people in the city, and it really was a pleasant historical city in many ways, despite having been bombed by various factions. Now there's 4.5 million. Right? The city is nowhere near set up for 4.5 million people, and if you fly over Kabul, you will not see a single factory in that entire city. The whole city is a bedroom city. Right? There is no industrialization of any kind, and that's 4.5 million who live one form or another from the aid transfers that are going on there. So you've had what's called Dutch disease in modern economics, right? Which is that you go from tradables to untradables, right? As a wildly distorting factor across that economy. The third thing is that all the violence means that everyone has a short-term investment perspective. Why would you possibly, including the drug lords, right? I would have no objection if all the guys selling opium say, let's launder our money through property in Kabul. But they don't. They launder it through property in Dubai because it's so much more secure in Dubai than it will ever be in Kabul. So all your basic economic factors are fixable, and they're pretty easy to figure out what they are. Now, how do you act on those, right? You're going to have to get past that fragility, and you're going to have to find a way that you have shock absorbers for that gigantic amount of money so it gets spent on things that aren't so distorting, right? And now we're, 20 years into this. There's still less land under irrigation than there was under the Taliban, right? And it's an agricultural economy in a desert. Right? You don't have irrigation. You're not producing anything.